Hello, and welcome to lesson 31 of the Learning Guitar series. In this particular lesson, we're going to discuss the shape of C7, so we're still in the realm of the Mixolydian. We started lesson 29, we discussed the shape of E7, so basically it's E major, dominant 7 chord, and then of course we transposed it and to derive all the other keys. In lesson 30, we looked at the so-called shape of D, so D7, and of course, again, we can place a barre in front of it and transpose it in all other keys. In this case, we're discussing the shape of C. In this case, it's a C chord. We're adding a B flat, so we're adding a flat 7. In this case, we have this particular shape. And since we're using 4 fingers in this case, we're not going to place a barre in front of it. We're literally going to transpose it as it is, eventually avoiding the first 2 strings. As we will see when we study chords, there are other possibilities where we might employ 5 strings, etc. But let's start from this. So if this is C7, obviously this is C sharp 7, D7, E flat 7 or D sharp 7, E7, E7, F7, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, and so forth and so on. Of course, we have a scale associated with it, and as usual, this lesson comes with a couple of PDFs with regards to scales and arpeggios, but you can always see them on this YouTube video and eventually post the video, okay? Let's have a look at the PDFs that come with them. So before we look at chords, let's look at the scale. So a Mixolydian scale, so we're looking at the 5th degree, is composed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 flat 7. The PDF, as usual, is written in G, so you have G7 Mixolydian, and this is the scale, and of course we can transpose it. And as usual, I would like to point out that, as you will notice, the G7 Mixolydian and C Ionian are exactly the same thing. And we know that when we study harmony and theory, at least like a beginner level of harmony and theory in lesson 16, we know that G7, in this case, G7 is chord number 5 for C. So C is chord number 1. So obviously the notes in the scale are the same. Not as obviously, the notes of the arpeggios are not going to be the same. Because of course when we studied, let's look at G, in this case G7, it's chord number 5 for C major. C Ionian. And we know that the concept of tension resolution, that's why this feels like a tension that wants to resolve into this chord. And by tension resolution, I mean, in a way, like if you want to make it a simple concept, it feels like it's the last chord of the song when it resolves. So I could do the same, like using open chords if you're playing acoustic guitar. This wants to go here, right? When it comes to the scale, obviously, now we have and as you can see, it fits. And the root note is here, so this is a G note, and this is the flat 7, this is the 6, 5, 4, major third. And if I keep going, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, root note, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The same way would work for Ionian. Of course, the numbers in the scale are going to change. Now, here is my root note, here is my number 1. This becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, major 7, root note, etc., etc. That's where sometimes the confusion arises. But it's good to study the modes because, of course, now you can see the scale, even if the scale looks the same, but the intervals from the root are going to be different. And as I said, especially if you use arpeggios in your playing, this becomes your guide notes. If you're playing G7, in this case, like if you're playing a dominant 7, while if you were playing Ionian, this might be your guide notes, 1, 3, 5, major 7, 1, 3, 5, major 7, 1. For dominant, instead, it's going to be 5, flat 7, 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 1, 3, 5. Okay? And again, we can transpose this in all keys. So if we look at the PDF, the first thing is basically just highlighting the scale. Then we have the arpeggios connected to this particular shape, so just a triad. dominant 7, so 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 6, other 9, 9, 11, and the full molar arpeggio. What that means, I'll show it to you on the guitar. So if we start from the root note, in this case, again, I'm doing it in the key of G. I could do it here and do it in the key of D. Actually, let's do that. Just, 1, 3, 5. That's just my triad. This if I did it 2 octaves. 1, 3, 5, flat 7. 1, 3, 5, other 9. 1, 3, 5, 6. 1, 3, 5, 6, 9. 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9. And of course, if I keep going, 7, 9, 11. And if I extend it even farther, 13. So all the extension of a Mixolydian scale, okay? So seen as an arpeggio. So a vertical stretcher versus an horizontal stretcher. And again, if it kind of confuses you, the idea of what is this guy talking about when he talks about extension, have a look at lesson 16 and that's going to clarify. But the extension on Mixolydian node, if we go beyond the triad plus the flat 7, are going to be 9, 11, and 13. Where the 9 and the 2nd are the same note, just an octave higher. 11 and the 4th are the same note, just an octave higher. 13 and the 6th, just the same note, an octave higher. As usual, the way you want to practice these arpeggios is take them individually. So let's take, for example, in this case, 7, 9. And you might want to do it, for example, alternated. So as usual, you might want to do this to a metronome, like I'm doing it now. This is just to show you. And you can do them also just ascending. So you just keep repeating it, just in one direction, basically. In this case, what you're looking at is E, 7, 9, F, 7, 9, F sharp, 7, 9, G, 7, 9, G sharp, 7, 9, etc. Or you can do them descending, so starting from the last note, in this case the 9, and play them backwards. 9, 7, 5, 3, 1. So this is F sharp, this is G, G sharp, A, etc. Oh, as I said, like already the alternative version, it's got a lot. There is already enough in it if you don't want to do, if you might not have the time to go through all of them in ascending, descending, and alternated. Nevertheless, in the PDF, I wrote the exercises for you. This is the first one. So this is basically just ascending. This is reversed. So this is just descending. And this is the alternative version. And this exercise applies to each individual arpeggio. So maybe one day you practice G9, and the other day you practice G11. Okay. If we move forward in the PDF, then there is the caged version of the arpeggio. The caged version of the arpeggio allows us to use all the strings at our disposal. As I mentioned before, I like to practice arpeggio. I think it's good to practice arpeggios from the root because it really trains your ears. So I have this chord, say G7, and I have this arpeggio. Because you can really hear the sound of the chord. The caged version instead uses all the strings available in that, portion of the guitar. So the arpeggio doesn't start on the root note, but rather it starts on the 5th. And actually I could start from the 3rd because it's also available. So you have 3, 5, flat 7, 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 1, 3, 5, 3 and 5. So at that point our practice becomes this. Then, you can keep doing it in the same spot and then start transposing it. Don't forget to tell yourself what key you are in so that your photographic memory kind of evolves. So when you do the exercises, you're basically practicing your muscle memory. But by looking at it and telling yourself what key you're in, you're also practicing your photographic memory, you're improving on it. So say if you do this in D, same thing. And the reason I know this is in D is because this note is D. That's my reference. So that's the chord. That's the arpeggio. This is F, so F, that's the arpeggio. Okay? I know A, that's the arpeggio. The beauty of the guitar, one of the many beauties of the guitar, is that it's a transposing instrument. So from that point of view, once you have the muscle memory, you're just moving it around. As we move forward in the PDFs, again, there is the usual group of 3 and group of 4 status. So, in other words, instead of playing the arpeggio, the caged arpeggio as one big sequence, we break it down in smaller chunks. So in group of 3 notes will be like the first 3 notes, then the following 3 notes, etc. Right? Group of 4 notes is the same thing. You take the first 4 notes, then the following 4 notes, then the following 4 notes, then the following 4 notes, 4 notes, 4 notes. And you have this kind of sound, right? Which I'm sure you're familiar with, right? Moving on the PDF, you have from scale to arpeggio. Also, that's a very kind of a useful exercise in getting you accustomed to the idea that, especially when you're soloing, you're playing fractions of scales, fraction of arpeggios. And so you're moving from maybe playing 3 notes on a string to playing 1 note on a string or 2 notes on a string. So this idea of playing the scale and then come up with the arpeggio, for example. Scale, arpeggio, scale, arpeggio. And the same thing backwards this time. Maybe we go down with the arpeggio and come up with a scale. The next exercises are related to from chord number 5 to chord number 1. So as we have seen at the beginning, as I said, the scale is the same, but of course the arpeggio is not the same. So what we're dealing with here is to learn how to move from one arpeggio to the other, because those are our guide tones in a way when you're playing a solo. So imagine you have a song that just goes from G7 to C. Okay, and actually there is many. What we're practicing here is going to chord number 1, arpeggio wise. I'm doing this using major 7 and dominant 7. So that's C major, and then you have C7, G7, C major, G7. Okay, and you keep doing that. As I said, when you're soloing. Actually, I'm going to do it. I'm going to just play a sequence without backing track or something, just that it goes from C to G. And hopefully you can hear the chord changes, even if there is no chord changes. And that's because in between the scale, I'm going to land on notes which are notes of C major in terms of the triad, or the major 7. And when it comes to G7, note of the triad or with the added flat 7 when it comes to G. So you have something like this. I hope you see what I mean. And as I say, the starting point from this is literally to practice. Now I'm going down in C, up in G7. Or you could do up in G7, C. Okay? Anyway, it's detailed in the PDFs. If it's, if from a video, it's not always kind of easy to get every single detail, but as I say, the PDF kind of has it. And so we're talking about this exercise here. The following exercise is, since we studied so far Ionian, Dorian, and Mixolydian, in this case, we're looking at moving from one to the other, but staying, in the same key. So in this case, you have G major Ionian, G minor Dorian, G7 Mixolydian. So we're basically practicing, and the same with the scale, by the way. We're basically practicing our ear training in terms of hearing the differences, because sometimes when you talk about modes, especially say, when I say G7 is the same scale as C major, and, especially if you're playing pop, at the end of the day, it's the same notes. So sometimes people feel like, okay, what's the point of doing the modes? What's the point of doing, say, Dorian, Phrygian, etc., when everything can be resolved just by using the one chord, so Ionian. And there is some truth to that, especially, if you're playing pop music. But sometimes certain chord progression that don't resolve into the one chord. I made many examples of this in the previous lesson. So sometimes it's good to see a chord from a modal perspective. And you can hear the difference of sounds. So like you say, if we do this in G. So this is G Ionian, as in G major, and this would be the scale that goes with it, right? The moment I move to G minor, now I have this. And now I have G7, and I have this. And if I play them in a sequence, you'll hear the difference. So that's my Dorian, and that's my Mixolydian. And the same thing with the arpeggios. So like this would be your G major arpeggio. I'm doing major sevens in this case. This would be your G minor, and this would be your G7. And I'm sure you can hear the difference in between, the three of them. And of course, like we're dealing with a major chord. So then we're dealing with a minor chord. And then we're dealing with a dominant 7 chord. Okay? And of course you want to play it in a sequence, and the same thing with the scale. At this point, even if it's not added to this particular PDF, you also might want to start connecting the various arpeggios, so some sort of recapping exercises starting from what you studied in week 29, 30, and 31. So let's say we do this again in the key of G. So this would be our G7 in the shape of E, okay? Then we have our G7, but this time in the shape of D. And now we started G7 in the shape of C. And of course there is still G7 in the shape of A to come, and G7 in the shape of G to come. So this guy. And at that point, we will have covered the Mixolydian in 5 shapes, which, when cage system, or if you use the 3 notes per string, is the same. You can kind of rewrite the PDF and apply to the 3 notes per string once you understand the theory behind it. So the fact that the Mixolydian scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. So if I take any point on the guitar, play this point. This is a D note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 8. That's the Mixolydian. Done. It's painting by numbers in a way. And if you think of the arpeggio, you're looking at 1, 3, 5, the triad, then you add the flat 7, and now you have like a dominant 7 arpeggio. If you want to extend it, now you know, because of the harmony and theory we done in lesson 16, that you can add a 9, 11, and 13 to it, and you have the full modal arpeggio. So, as I said, 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 11, 13. Kind of done in a way. But if you follow my lessons from the beginning, you don't have to take all this information in one go. I'm kind of building up, in a way, slowly. Well, not necessarily like if you realize the amount of time it takes to practice this thing, not in terms of understanding them, might take a couple of days. Understand the logic of it. To build muscle memory and photographic memory generally takes at least a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, if you're kind of working every day with it, even a couple of hours. And so, as I said, you might want to build slowly. And if you're seeing these lessons from the first time, you might want to start kind of from the beginning before you get here. Anyway, even if out of these 4 pages of PDF, you find just one thing, maybe one arpeggio that, you particularly like, and it gets into your playing, that's already fantastic. Let's move on. And the next thing we're going to look at is some chord shapes. So for that, again, we have another PDF that goes with it. As you can see, this is the scale. I put it here so you have a reference, and you can see in blue the chord that I highlighted. This is the caged arpeggio that I showed you. And basically, this is the basic chord that we're using as the starting point. And then there is a lot of possible variations of it. So adding some extra color. In this case, I'm adding a 9 and a 5th, root note and 11. This is basically without the third, 1, flat 7, 9, and 11. They're all extracted from this pretty much. Most of the time, I try to include the flat 7 so to give it like a proper Mixolydian sound. And I'll show you some of these examples. But as I said, like when you use this kind of system, don't forget your reference is the root note. And that's why the PDFs, when it comes to chord, doesn't say, okay, do this at fret 3 or do this at fret 9. Because at the end of the day, it depends what key you want. Okay. So my reference is, this is my shape and I can move it anywhere. And this is one of my root notes is right here. The other one is actually, down here. But in the PDF, most of the time, I'll use this as a reference. And based on that, you have a bunch of possible chords. Okay? And you'll find them all in the PDF. The only thing you need to be kind of aware of, in case, as I said, if this is the first time you see one of my lessons, if you see a white dot, so that's the root note, but you don't play this note. This is the chord you want to play. This is here to give you a visual reference. Okay. So let's actually take this one as an example. So you have flat 7, 9, 5, and 1. That's what we're going to be playing. So if this is my chord, and we'll do it in the key of D. Okay. This is my root note. That's the 1. So that's the white dot you just saw. And this is the chord that we just saw on the PDF. So basically like this chord. So it depends where you put the root note. That's what is going to give the name to the chord. Let's look at this one, for example, flat 7, 3, 6, 9. And this is my root note. The way it is, let's do this in F. So this is F, and this is the chord in the PDF. As you can see, I'm not playing the root notes. I tend to kind of use more the ones which have the root note in it if I'm accompanying, say, a singer. For example, if there is no bass player, so a duo gig, kind of duo gig type of thing. And so in that case, I might carry the bass and have these kind of chords. But if there is a bass player, I might not play the root note because anyway, he's going to be playing it. So I might do more, interesting sounding chords, at least from my point of view. As I said, in the PDF, you have both basic chords, but also like some more, interesting color. You have a couple of pages of it you can have fun with. So in terms of lesson, this is pretty much it. I mean, as I said, like you can pause the video when the PDFs come up, and you can have a look at them. Or the other alternative, you can actually download them. I have a Patron page, and you can support this project, which would be very welcome if you do. And it's like $3 a month, and you have access to all the PDFs from all the lessons so far. And for the advanced Patron, you also have access to a series of backing tracks or some extra material that I'm creating on purpose to be, to practice in a more musical way the things that we're studying. In this case, I created the 12 backing tracks, one per key. Let's put it this way, to practice Mixolydian. This particular lesson, but also like combined with lesson 30 and lesson 29. What that means is that the chord progression of each backing tracks consists of 3 chords, all dominant 7 that will kind of help you in practicing the 3 shape you've done so far. Let me explain it to you on the guitar, probably it's easier. So let's say one of the progression goes E7 into A7 into G7. These 3 chords, and it kind of loops around for like 4 minutes. The reason it's designed that way is because if I take, say, this cage beside the guitar, this is my E7, and it's basically the lesson we've done today. That's my G7. Now I'm using the shape of E, and that will be lesson 29. And when it comes to G7, I can use this shape, and this is lesson 30. So basically I can deal with all these 3 chords and basically 3 different tonalities, because when I'm playing E7, I'm basically in the key of A. E7 is chord number 5 for A. When I'm playing A7, now I shifted to the key of D. And when I'm playing G7, now I shifted in the key of C. So again, this is another reason why I personally like to think in terms of modes. Because if I was to try and improvise over this progression, and every time that a new chord came along, I had to mentally think, okay, it's E7, which means A Ionian. Then when it's A7, I have to kind of do an extra step with my brain and think, okay, it's A7, which means it's D Ionian. And when it's G7, oh, that means now I'm in C Ionian. If these chords happen this chord changes kind of happen fast, my brain, at least my brain, will not necessarily be able to catch up all the time. So if I see E7, I think E7, which means I think E Mixolydian. So in the case of the backing track, all that is happening there is it's going from one chord to another, and then use the same backing track to practice the scales that goes with them. And as I say, they are the ones in the PDF. And then the arpeggios. I'm going to show it to you. So like in a second, I will load the backing track and play along. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play some chord shapes first, so that I can practice that side of the thing. Then I'm going to use just arpeggios. Then I'm going to use just scales. And then I'm just going to improvise. So mixing up things. I'm just going to spend like maybe 10, 20 seconds on each, so that, I don't play for 4 minutes and, send you to sleep with it. So I'm going to load the backing track and show it to you. And this is it for what concerns lesson 31. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope, more importantly, I hope you will find it useful. As I said, if you feel like supporting this project, it would be great if you could do this on Patron. I'll leave a link in the video description. And the backing tracks are available to the advanced supported archive supporters on Patron, and that's around $9 a month, which I think is well worth it, you know. And of course, the backing track is in 12 keys, so you can practice all across the neck of the guitar. As I said, I hope you'll find these lessons useful. In your progressing with regards to studying the guitar. And of course, if there is something that you find that is not maybe like too clear, or if you have any question in general, you can always leave a comment. I'll try and reply as quickly as possible anyway. And I hope you're all safe, obviously, with everything that is going on, and I hope you're doing okay. It's been a pleasure, and until next time.